Ann Mayer.
Here.
Carol Chelman. Dexter Legg.
Here.
Rebecca Remison.
Here.
Ann Walker.
Here.
Mitch Schulman.
Here.
Kent LePage. Tom Martin.
Here.
Leslie Stevens. Clay Haywood. Linda Brulette. Liz Boynton.
Thank you. If I could ask you to join me for a moment of silence and then the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So, let's see, a motion to accept the minutes from June 23rd.
So moved. Second.
Any conversation on those? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. And then a motion to accept the minutes for July 6th.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion, corrections, additions, add things you didn't say that you wanted to say that you thought you should have said? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. There is nobody signed up for public comment tonight, so I'll offer anybody who would like to speak to come forward. Members of the press, welcome. Okay, so we'll just move on then and go to the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In your materials, you have the most recent board and administrator highlighting the importance of regularly monitoring progress of school board goals from administrators throughout the school year. So I thought that was an appropriate little paragraph to highlight. You have Principal Shea has provided you the spring edition of the New Franklin Gazette, where there's much to share, and I think you'll find Mr. Shea waxes poetic a little bit around plantings, practice, and harvests of many types. You have an update from the Portsmouth Middle School project safety organizers, Mr. Stopel, Ms. Webb, and Ms. Christmas. They actually highlight through both pre- and post-survey data the impact that they're actually having with their annual 7th grade project safety conference and letting students know about high-risk behaviors and about the dangers of associated high-risk behaviors. And so it's a very well-run program.
I just wanted to say that I thought that the comments that the students made were exceptional. The comments both before and the comments after, they really got it. Yeah. And the other thing I wondered about the fact that New Franklin's library is open in the summer on Monday mornings. I wondered how that is working. How is that able to be done, I guess is what my question is.
I can't speak to that directly.
Yeah, I know.
I think it's great.
Yeah,
and I know they're all welcome, all the kids.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I was over there this past Monday, and there was quite a few students there. And as you probably know, the program we've been having for all of the elementary schools this summer is housed at New Franklin, and so students.
So that's how that's happening.
Right.
Okay. Great. Thanks.
Continuing on, you have Dora and Whittier has completed their scope of work and looking at our elementary school facilities. So I've provided you just the introduction and the executive summary of the report, as it's just under 300 pages long. The lead architect on this project, Tom Hengelsberg, will actually provide the board a presentation on his findings around the facilities at our next meeting, which is scheduled for August 23rd. I've also shared with you an article some of you may have already seen in the May 2011 School Board Journal regarding this author's 4 keys to having a successful retreat for the school board, so I share that for your consideration later on in the agenda. You've also got a letter from Comcast. We've received information about a new program that Comcast will offer this fall. It basically makes students who are ultimately eligible for a free school lunch will now be eligible to receive home internet access and a computer at a very reduced cost. And so we'll share this information with families this fall. And lastly, I shared a copy of the letter that Chairman Schulman had written to the City Council, and perhaps he might update the board later on how that went last evening.
Okay. Thank
that's ultimately it
Any
for the
questions
superintendent's
about the superintendent's report? No? Okay. Do some financials?
Yes, I can give you a quick verbal update. We're hard at work making sure that we audit each of the grants in each of the departments as we prep for the year end and the audit. Based on where we are right now, we have come out on the positive side, which is what I predicted, which is good. And that will allow us two things that will allow us to cover special ed expenses, which we knew we had anticipated would be more than budget, and we'll be able to increase our transfer to help that program go forward. We'll also be able to do a couple of the maintenance projects that we had to delay due to unforeseen failures during the year. When that happens, we end up having to pull back on some of the projects, and we try to maximize everything out. So we're working on managing the usage of what hasn't been spent appropriately to adequately cover special ed and the facilities and maintenance areas. And at the next on the August 23rd meeting, I should be able to provide you a list, because we should have everything in and everything audited by then.
Okay. Anyone have any questions? So, do you have a rough idea or some examples of the kind of facilities work that might be considered?
We have postponed a couple of times adding some AC to some computer teaching areas where that's really needed. We'll be able to add a couple of stations to take up the extra spaces that are needed in the high school to, for as we adjust programs so that there's a need, and I'm not even sure which course it is, but it's one of the Steve Cirillo's department courses that has a need for more stations, so that'll get taken care of.
More computer stations?
Yes. So we have to order furniture, computers, and if we don't put AC in the room, we can't put any more heat load in there, so that AC will be taken care of. A couple other examples are there's a hot water heater that was limping along that we're going to end up fixing. We had a failed section of field irrigation, which we can ill afford to let go too long. So those are the types of things that Kenny puts together a long list, and we sit there and prioritize it with Ed and Steve and Kenny and the principals to make sure that we spread it out and try to stay up on our take care of things as they're with the most priority of needs with the little money that we do have left over.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, anyone? Okay.
Mitch?
Yes, Dick.
I should have asked this question when you were reviewing correspondence, and if you plan to update us later on the agenda about the July 18th meeting.
That was yesterday, yes.
Workshop, then
I
fine,
can do that.
if not.
No, I was actually, before we went into the old business, I was going to cover
Okay, thanks.
two of those things. So last night, the City Council had a work session with the Charter Committee members, the members of the City Council, and myself and the Fire and Police Commissioners. And they went over a number of the recommendations that the Charter Committee had come out with based on all the suggestions that had come in. So I don't know actually how many went in, but they came out with about three major recommendations, one of which was relative to us on the school board, the issue of the superintendent. The ability, because we had asked for clarifying language so that the school board would have full authority and control over the ability to hire the superintendent, negotiate with, and decide on the compensation package, and we wanted clarity. And so basically, it was actually a pretty good discussion. The meeting itself went on for about 2 hours and covered a couple of other points, but I think at the end of the evening, the straw poll sense of the council that the mayor was sort of asking was that I think that they may just leave things as they are, and the current language as is, and not put forward a recommendation for a charter amendment change. I think that was the consensus. And I think we're okay with that, because I know as a board we've talked about this, that we believe that some of this ability is already implied in the current charter for us to move forward with that thinking. So, I think that was the only one that really related to the school board specifically. Any questions about that? You could watch it. So the only other thing I wanted to bring up was, the superintendent mentioned that in August we would have a presentation about the elementary facilities assessment, and that's fine. I think either tonight or after we have that meeting, I'd like to sort of get a sense from the board as to direction and timeline and how we want to move. I don't think we need to really have that conversation tonight unless people have something to say about it, but as we get into that meeting and after that meeting, we should figure out how we want to proceed. Tom? Oh, Steve.
I was thinking in terms of that report that the facilities committee has been pretty, well involved in that process from the get-go. And I think that after they've had time to review the full report and report back, that would probably be the a good foundation for that discussion you're asking for.
So you think the facilities committee could help lead a conversation with us?
Absolutely.
Yeah. That'd be good.
We'd like to.
Okay, great. So we'll have the presentation by the facilities, the company that did the assessment, and also a conversation with the committee. Okay, great. That'll be good. Thank you. Okay. Moving on. Old business. Yeah.
Well, so the first item is to update you a little bit on the Year 2 implementation of supervision and evaluation. You might recall in May we updated you on our efforts to cause all professional staff to be evaluated, and noted that at the time that we would reconvene a working group of teachers and administrators to review both the warm and cool feedback that we had received at the end of Year 1. So this evening in your packet I've included the report and recommendations from this group so that we might strengthen the process moving forward next year. For those who are watching, you might remember it was 2 years ago we adopted a job description, as well as last year an appraisal instrument that was based upon Charlotte Danielson's work. Staff used this framework of planning, instruction, professional responsibilities, and classroom management as a way to do a self-assessment, and it was a way for administrators to provide feedback back to teachers on their status. And we used a 4-point scale. We think this framework provided us a good common language to talk with teachers about their practice. Staff also shared reflections on their work with our professional learning community efforts. But as we thought about last year, the bulk of what we did, as onerous as it was and as well-intentioned as it all was, we were largely focused solely on the evaluation piece. We were giving teachers an update on their status as teachers in the district. So when we met with the working group a little bit subsequent to that, one of the things we wanted to do was also focus on the supervision piece, which is to say we wanted to add a component for teacher growth. Not just a status check, but how are you growing as a teacher? Because we know that even small increments in teacher effectiveness can have a dramatic impact on student achievement. And so one of the things you'll notice in this document is we've worked to establish an annual growth cycle, so that in October, all staff will actually meet with an administrator using what we call a streamlined goals and activities sheet. They'll share with their administrator what their team's PLC goals are. Based on Danielson's framework, they'll select an area for professional growth, and then they'll share their professional development plan and activities going forward over the course of the year. But one of the things that was clear throughout all the feedback we received is that teachers are looking for even more critical feedback on their practice. And what we found is building principals can't singularly do that and still manage their buildings at the level with which teachers are expecting. So we've created, in short, a 2-year cycle where 50% of the staff will basically go forward, receive feedback and observations from their administrator, and will receive an appraisal. On the off year, they'll still go through the goal-setting process, etc., but what they will do is they'll work with their colleagues, be it through collegial observations, videotaping, etc. They'll get the bulk of their feedback from their peers and then come back in March and report that. I would characterize it as the distinction between an administrator-led conference and a teacher-led conference. Here's the work, here's the goals I set, here's the effort and success I've had, areas to continue to work on. So it's kind of dividing the workload for principals so that it's still manageable and doable. So that in short order is kind of what the working group was recommending. There are a lot of artifacts in there as well. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, but absent any concerns, this is kind of what we're looking forward to implement next school year.
This would be different for new teachers, correct?
New teachers and teachers who are in need of
Totally
improvement are
separate.
completely different. These are folks who are doing well
Right.
in the system.
Yes, Ann.
Is there any formalized structure as to how the teacher, the colleagues, or how many times they, I mean, this is 50% of the population, so it seems to me there's a lot of time that we're asking of the other teachers to be there for their peers. How is that going to be incorporated into their day or into their contract, or, you know, what happens? Are they, if they're out of class, do they have a substitute for the time that they're missing to be in somebody else's classroom?
Well, yeah, you know, we're not good, Ann, and quite honestly, I wouldn't say we're in the details around the negotiating that. If teachers are looking for feedback on practice, we're expecting them to work amongst their colleagues and their professional learning communities to make arrangements to do that. You know, there's a double bonus to that as well. Not only are you getting feedback from somebody on your practice, but you get in and see others as well. So it's like there's a double benefit, I think, to that peer cycle review, rather than just an administrator laying the word down. I mean, if this is ultimately about a growth area you want to work on, you've got a plan to do it. You kind of engage your colleagues to give you feedback on it.
I mean, and you may trust your colleagues.
Well, one of the things that was clear is to lay it all on an administrator to be the sole person to provide feedback was not doable. It just wasn't doable.
Thank you.
Well, if I could just jump in and add to that. But it also seems to me if teachers spend over the course of the year time with their peers to talk about their own practice and things that they want to focus on and ask for advice and opinions, that the rigor of that, which is kind of what I think you were asking about a little bit, would be reflected, or could be reflected, in the meeting that they then have that year with the administrators. So it's not that they're not going to be meeting with the principal at all. It's just that instead of the principal doing the observation, it's going to be the teacher that's coming forward with sort of a summary of their year experience and progress report. And the administrator hopefully would be able to ask the questions that would get a sense of, well, did they really work at that?
And then the PLC group.
That's what I guess I'm thinking about.
Well, in fact, you'd also expect the rigor of the off-year evaluation by the building administrator to also improve. I mean, the reality is, one of the disadvantages that the education system has, and Mitch, you and I have talked about this, is because it's such a flat structure, the span of control in education is far, far wider than the span of control in a business environment. In a business environment, you may have, at most, 10 or 12 direct reports that you'd be responsible for evaluating each year. And in an education environment, you may have 2 or 3 times or more. And it really is impractical to think that an administrator in every 12-month cycle can do a comprehensive performance evaluation for everybody. So I applaud this approach. I think it's terrific. I hope it gets implemented the right way, because I think conceptually it makes a lot of sense.
And just to add to that point, I think weaving the personal and professional development into the PLC component, that biannual review no longer becomes a surprise to the teacher. There's going to be evaluations every single month as the PLC meetings are happening, so that the time that that evaluation every 2 years happens. It's not a surprise. We already know where that teacher's going to be. That integration with PLC and the fact that we're not suddenly setting up separate meetings for this, and this is all going to be adding just other components to the PLC process. We'll really understand where the teachers are, and we'll be able to keep track and be able to manage it on a regular basis versus just every 2 years.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. You okay? Do you have any other questions? Okay. All right. So moving on. So let's have a little conversation about the retreat. Do we have a date yet? On the
We do know.
responses?
We've had 4 folks respond, and there are 2 dates that are common to all 4 respondents.
Okay.
And that's Saturday, the 10th of September, as well as the 24th.
So maybe a second email out to the rest of the board. And maybe August, when everybody's here, might be a better time to have this conversation. But do people have any ideas of how they'd like to, certain things they'd like to see within the structure of the retreat? And we're going to have a facilitator. And I think it would be nice, according to even the article we were looking at, maybe some way for some members of the board to sit down and figure out a structure for that day, that time. Any thoughts?
So are you asking partially content versus structure, or both?
Well, I'm thinking structure for the day. I mean, content-wise, I think we'll review goals and figure out, listen to the superintendent goals, come up with board goals. I mean, we're open for ideas for conversation. And I think part of it is, as a board, what is it at the end of the day we'd like to actually have achieved by having this retreat? Clarity on certain things for ourselves. So maybe people need a little more time to think about it. We can have a broader conversation at the next board meeting. Send ideas to the superintendent if you have any through email of what you'd like to see the outcome of that meeting, things you might want to talk about. Just throwing out ideas.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of things that come to mind that I think from the standpoint of actually having some definitive goals that we actually have an action plan that we walk away with. I mean, I've got a lot of different ideas and some things that maybe I'll share and just coalesce some of the ideas in my own mind and be ready for the next meeting. But I think the idea is that we want to actually, develop a roadmap for the next, X number of months.
Right.
If it's 12 or 6 till the next meeting, we can have a set of short-term and long-term plans, and then we're trying to do 2 retreats a year. Is that correct?
Right. So the mid-year is not quite as. This would really be a larger, a little bit more robust than later.
So the mid-year is an opportunity to check on where we are or some of the goals that we've actually set.
So I'm going to have to watch the broadcast to hear what Tom said.
I know.
But
You can't hear?
if what he said was, it's an opportunity, I can't read lips either. So, and so this may be redundant, Tom, but it seems to me, a quick assessment of where we are.
Right.
But I think it's an opportunity to look out beyond 1 year. And I'd encourage us to look out for maybe, I'm not into 5-year plans, but maybe over the next 24 to 36 months, as a board, if you think about what we've accomplished over the last 2 to 3 years, we've done some, I think, pretty remarkable stuff. Firstly, hiring the superintendent, getting the middle school launched, beginning to get performance standards aggressively applied across the district. But over the course of the next 24 to 36 months, what are some of the big tasks that we want to accomplish, that we either face or think we want to accomplish. So we don't take it in a 12-month cycle. And I think there are just a few in my mind. There's only a couple of big things that may be drivers for us at this point. And I'd like to sort of focus on those. And then you can I mean, if that makes sense, then you work in your annual goals sort of based on that, and then you come back and say, okay, for 2012, here are the objectives that are going to help us get to those things.
It's exactly
And so my point is, I think it needs to be a bit more strategic.
Yes, I hear you.
Than maybe some of our other, although if you think about it in retrospect, they were strategic.
Right.
But I'd like to be a little bit more
with some bigger issues.
intentional.
Right. At least set the groundwork for things that we can accomplish
Yeah.
in 24 months. Instead
Maybe.
Of just
I mean, it's a thought.
Yeah.
You were just struggling for stuff, Mitch, so I'm throwing it out.
Well, I mean, to that point, I mean, we're trying to talk about things that are not business as usual.
Well, no, that's the point.
Non-BAU
Correct.
issues that says, where are we steering the educational community? What are some of the things that are going to really impact long-term that we can, plant, nurture, and manage going forward?
So if you think about it, the focus of a retreat 2 cycles ago, where we asked administration to think carefully and bring back performance measures and develop a peer group and begin to have metrics that we can measure ourselves against ourselves and ourselves against a peer group. And the stuff the administration has done on that has really given us a framework to understand where we are and where we need to go. And that's something that came out of the retreat that took a while to implement. In my mind, that's sort of a core that sets us up for future success. There may be a few other things now that we need to do to kind of continue to create a foundation that we can continue to be successful. And maybe not, Mitch, but
No.
I think so. I think so.
I actually agree
Well, thanks.
with everything you said.
You couldn't hear anything.
No, but what I was
have to
saying was
watch it.
that's exactly the same exact thing.
That's
that
probably
Tom
what
said.
Tom said.
It was.
We couldn't hear him either.
So okay.
Here for both sides.
So we can do that, and we can have a conversation with the facilitator and make sure we incorporate that into the day. Okay, and we'll talk about it more at the next meeting. But if you have any other so the things you didn't share with us tonight, Dexter, so what some of those big tasks might be, maybe you could email to the superintendent.
I will.
Share those. Okay. Anything else? So if we'll send out another email round to the members who haven't. We'll confirm a date in September. Hopefully it'll be one of those 2 days. Okay. New business.
Yes. So this evening, we have Kim LaCroce here, who's a Community Adult Education Director, has been for some time. Just as a way of background, we've invited her here. I've had a couple of meetings with her over the last couple of weeks. Going back a few years ago, there was, as a result of budget planning, some cutbacks to what typically has been enjoyed in the adult community education budget. And the notion being that over time, I guess, that it would become a self-supporting program. Quite frankly, Kim has shared, and it's in your packet, some information. She'll walk you through that, the history of that, and then our plans moving forward to kind of, because I think the board needs to weigh in on its support for adult community education and where we head and what we're talking about. So we're trying to bring you folks up to speed with the current state of affairs in adult community education. So welcome, Kim. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
No.
Not really.
Do I have to get closer? Again, I'm Kim LaCroce. I'm the director of the Portsmouth Community Ed Program for about 10 years. My position is a part-time position with no benefits, just so that you know exactly where I'm coming in. My work week depends on where we are with the schedule of the program, which runs year-round. It could be anything from a 20-hour work week to a 40-hour work week, depending on where exactly we are with the program as far as printing of the brochure, getting the information out, scheduling classes, and so forth. For those of you who are not familiar with the Portsmouth Community Education Program, it is an elective, non-accredited program. And I'm sure many of you have seen the brochure that comes out twice a year. We send out about 33,000 brochures twice a year, as I said. Our mission is to educate adult learners in our community and try to stay in sync with the Portsmouth School Department's own mission of educating all students, challenging them, making them continue on with their, allowing them to continue on with their education as they go through their lifetime. Our programs range from everything from foreign languages, we have Italian, French, Spanish, to pediatric first aid, we have resume writing programs, computer courses. We've had some elder care programs recently, cooking, craft courses, and a variety of other programs that we offer. Again, we submit 33,000 brochures that go out twice a year. They go in the Portsmouth Herald, they go in the IT circular, which is a free circular that comes in the mail on Fridays. Many of you probably have seen that. We have a mail constituency that we've been sending brochures out to, as well as phone requests, school drops, and a variety of other locations that we drop the brochures off at. Last year we had 730 students take the class. The class cost per hour is $7.50, which keeps us right in the ballpark with the other community ed programs in the area, which tend to range anywhere from $6.30 to $7.50. And when I'm talking about other area programs, I'm referring to Kittery, York, Dover, and Exeter, who also run community ed programs. Last year, our program cost the school at the end of the year $18,000. This figure represents a cost per pupil to the school of $25. And the way that I got to that number, just in case you're looking at that, is the gross expenses minus the gross revenues equaling the net expense divided by the number of students. So again, that would be the $18,000 that was a net expense divided by the 730 students, coming out with the $25 per pupil cost. Cutting a program like that, like this, not only affects our adult learners, it also affects our well-respected adult instructors who've done with our program, some of them for well over 15 years. As Ed mentioned, in the past few weeks, I've been meeting with Ed, Steve, and Steve to try to come up with some creative ways to make this program more self-sustained. To be honest with you, I'm not sure that it will ever be completely self-sustained, but I'm certain that we can at least close the gap significantly. One of the ideas that we had was highlighted as number one in the packet that you received, and it is the most cost-efficient method of saving money. It's also environmentally proactive, and it seems to be the direction that most of us are moving into at this time as far as online billing and payments and information and so forth. We're referring more and more to our computers now. Again, I'm referring to idea number one, which is eliminating the printing and mailing of the brochures. And I'm looking at it as a two-step process. If we in fact go with this idea, you could save up to $16,000 a year as far as printing and mailing costs go. My only concern with that, and I mentioned this to Ed last week, was that if we moved to that directly without going through a phasing out stage, many of our older constituents, particularly those who are uncomfortable with computers, may have been lost in the transition. So if we could think about maybe doing half a year with the printed brochure, half a year with the online, that would be the direction that I would love to see us go, and then eventually move everything to online. Unknown variables at this time include computer use, software for this type of program, how we establish the program online. I don't know how it will directly affect my time. It may be heavier now, lighter later, I'm not sure. But it's certainly something that at this point is an unknown variable. The only other suggestion that we came up with that seems like a positive also for cutting the cost would be to increase our price, which is idea number 3, by $5 per course. That allows us to maintain a competitive edge with the other programs in the area, and based on the number of students we had this past year, if we were to adopt that idea, we could see an increase of roughly $3,600. So, having said all that, it's a wonderful program. I know some of you may have taken courses or may know people that have taken courses in the past. It's very popular with our community. When I talk about our community, I'm not just talking about Portsmouth, I'm talking about the greater Seacoast area. It's been around for well over 15 years. We started here in the high school. When the high school went through the renovation, we moved over to the middle school. We've been there for about 8 years. And, you know, we'll be looking to move wherever you would like me to, wherever the program would best make it fit at this time, if in fact we can have the program run again. So, having said all that, may I answer any questions that you have at this time?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank
Tom.
you.
And then Rebecca.
Thank you very much. One of the things, I've taken a number of classes. I think the adult education in our community really enhances our community. I like the fact that we give citizens here in the community an opportunity to advance their learning in a lot of different things, and I've enjoyed a number of classes that are out there. The first thing that comes to my mind here is that, in some ways, is that you're talking about an expense issue that we really have, and one of the things that I don't see in here is that we have 730 students. I don't know, has that been dropping? And in past years, we've had more students. You mentioned in option 2 about the fact that we actually send this material out to a lot of surrounding communities, and if we raise the rates, we'll bring our expenses dramatically down and actually maybe even have some additional revenue. But I'm thinking that we might not have an expense issue, but maybe a participation issue, as well as understanding that things have changed dramatically technologically, and knowing that we need to find a way to go from how we've always done business to what the new way of doing business is. So I would almost want to find out more information about how we can improve the program and maybe find some ideas, because maybe there are courses that students, adults would like to have that are not offered.
We do try to, if you don't mind me interrupting you, and please, feel free to ask more questions, but we do try to address that issue. We ask people to respond. We send out a questionnaire at the end of the program asking people each course that they take if there's anything in particular that they're looking for. So we've kind of adapted over the last 10 years when I've been in this position. Where probably 10 or 11 years ago we were predominantly craft and cooking, and we even had a welding course at one point. Moving over to the middle school, we had to eliminate that program, but because of the economy, we've had to offer business courses, resume writing programs. We offer a great program for comeback moms trying to find the job that's out there that you've done, since you've been out of the workforce for years. Foreign language, because so many people are traveling. So we're trying to address the needs of the community at large, and again, more than just the Portsmouth area. We're talking about the greater Seacoast area. We're talking about Rochester. We're talking about Exeter. We're talking about York. Communities that do partake in our activities here, and trying to make sure that we're identifying their needs and trying to offer the programs they're interested in.
Right. So if we're competing with Dover and Exeter, those were two communities that you mentioned have adult ed programs, how do we stack up? And if we want to continue, if the goal of this is to continue this program, how do we compete against them better? How do we draw more people from out? And do we have a demographic of how many people actually come from Portsmouth versus out of Portsmouth?
I don't, unfortunately. We've never really broken that down. And unfortunately, I have nothing on the computer either. Everything that's been done for us has been done through a mail company, as well as our mail constituency goes.
Right.
So we don't have that information, unfortunately. But I can tell you that we do have a couple of competing programs where we run the same programs at each of the different towns. But those are the ones that are the more popular ones that seem to fill very quickly, that there seems to be a lot of interest in. For example, the Italian program. Each of the towns seem to offer some type of Italian program, and nobody seems to have a hard time drawing students for that particular program. So I understand what you're saying, is there overlap within the communities themselves, and there is a bit. And as far as the numbers of the past couple of years, again, the economy has played a large part, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, in the numbers dropping down. But I think we're beginning to see things turn around. We had several classes this semester that actually filled. We haven't had that for a couple of years.
Right. Okay.
Rebecca, and then I have Steve.
Well, one of my questions was how many people in other communities take part, but we don't have that information. But then I was wondering if you had thought about sort of making option number 4, eliminating some of the printing and direct mailing, in addition to increasing the cost. I don't know how much direct mailing we need to do, or inserting into the Herald Sunday, perhaps just the IT circular. I don't know if it's the Sunday and the IT are a combined thing, but I think that would reduce a lot without lessening the visibility,
Right.
and then a small cost increase. So I think something like that.
A hand in hand is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that's a good idea.
That's it. Thanks.
Well, I just thought I'd add a little bit of financial perspective from a different viewpoint that might help a little bit, in that I looked at the last 4 years, because I think what you have to understand is that the program revenue itself has pretty much remained stable for the last 4 years. It's been north of 35,000, 35, 36, 37,000. That's what they take in program revenue. The expenditures over that same time period have been between 55 and 57,000. The reason that the program was viable was that prior to 2010, those 3 years that I have there, you subsidized it in the general fund budget to the tune of about $22,000 to $25,000. When we started to have the budget crunch in 2010, we cut it by a third. So it went from, we reduced it a little bit, tried to economize, so that ended up going from $25,000 in the general fund in 2008 to $21,000 in 2009, and then we dropped it to $13,000 in 2010. And then 2011 and proposed in 2012, the general fund support is $3,100. So basically, what you can see is that without the subsidy from the general fund, we either got to decrease expenses or increase revenues, and some combination thereof, unless you want to put the subsidy back in the general fund. What has helped keep it going along is that in good years, they did have a surplus, and because it's in Fund 27, which is tuition and fees, and essentially we treat that like an enterprise fund, we're able to keep that fund balance in that program and use it to offset shortfalls each year. Okay? But we've run out of fund balance to offset shortfalls at the end of this year. So, primarily that's why we're trying to bring it to your attention and get a read on what the consensus is, because there are a number of people who feel that it's quite an important and a good program, but in terms of funding from the general fund, it's in conflict with our budgeting crunch, unfortunately. So that's sort of a little different financial perspective, which may help you understand how we got where we are.
So if I could just ask a quick question, follow up on that. So basically what you're saying is this Fund 27 has allowed the district to keep the accumulated excess revenues of the previous years to use to pay off the expenses over the last couple of years, and now that's depleted, so that money doesn't exist anymore to draw upon.
That's correct.
Okay. Yes, Ann.
So the bottom line is that our decision is, do we subsidize, or do we recommend increasing revenue and decreasing expenses? And a little of both, maybe.
So I have a couple of quick little questions, just so I understand the program better. So have you ever looked into offering through adult ed, as many communities do, the GED?
The GED program is actually offered through the Rockingham County Action
Through Rockingham
Program,
County.
so it's separate from this. We do advertise for them or direct people to their program,
Right.
but
But you don't compete with them.
No, we don't.
Okay. And so what does basically a teacher make when they teach one of these things?
Our teachers make somewhere between 20 or 25 an hour, depending on the number of students that they usually have in their classes and the number of years they've been with us. And that number has been solid for, I would say, at least 13 years. That hasn't changed at all.
Right. And I know this would cost more money. I'm just curious, though. Have you ever looked into offering different, other than what I see here, a little bit more robust academic kind of workshops, bringing in historians to talk about the Civil War, so it's not, crafts and
Sure.
language?
We've offered, for example, we've offered the past couple of semesters, one of our instructors is an author who wrote a book about Ernest Hemingway, and he's been doing a course of the stories of Ernest Hemingway for the past couple semesters. So we do bring in a couple of programs like that. We also had writing the college essay for some of the parents who were interested in helping their child through that progress. We offered at one point a program for the adults on new math, trying to help our children understand the new math. Sometimes the programs run, sometimes they don't. Unfortunately, the new math was not very popular.
No.
So
Kids don't like it.
I don't think the adults do.
Yes.
So, like Tom said, I think the adult education is terrific for the community. Clearly, it becomes harder and harder for the Portsmouth district to fund any gap. So I guess, just to repeat what others have said, I would encourage you to move away from direct mail. I mean, the reality is, in any business, the economics of direct mail just don't work anymore.
Right.
They don't work in this business, they don't work in the insurance business, people don't respond to direct mail. So I'd strongly encourage you to think of other ways, and maybe it's understanding better what your target population really is. So for example, are these 700 students, are they all new? Do you have a lot of repeaters? I mean, to better understand that will help you to target your communication in a much better way.
Absolutely.
And to the extent that we understand, or you understand, what the average fee is for the semester, not at an hourly basis, but what a student is actually paying, might help you to also be able to increase fees without affecting participation levels. I mean, to Tom's point, it may be that, in fact, you can somehow increase your revenue both by increasing fees, by increasing offerings that are more targeted to people. I know this is stuff you probably already all thought of.
That's okay.
But I don't see how we can continue to fund the gap given the pressure we have. I mean, at one level it's not a lot of money, but at another level it is.
I understand what you're saying. Just to give you a little background also, this was a typical year. I had no idea going into the 1st of July that the program was not running. I had not had any negative feedback that we weren't going to actually run as we had in the past. And just to give you a better understanding of what I typically do, the first week of July I send letters out to my faculty asking them for course information to turn it around by the 23rd, which is this weekend. I haven't been able to do that, obviously, to get the brochure ready for October. So the longer I draw this out, the longer, or the further behind we're going to be and the more difficult it is to achieve the same revenue that we did last year. Not to say that, we can't scramble quickly, but I do need to have a decision made rather promptly so that we can either go ahead with the program or, let the faculty know they should look for something else to do.
The other thing I'd encourage you, to the extent that you're going to try and do stuff online and design websites and stuff like that, I mean, see if you can get support from the high school, see if you can get some pro bono work. Right. There's no reason to think that there aren't people out there, either in our school system or in others, that can help handle some of the online stuff, right, and do it for free.
We had talked about that actually at the last meeting that we had. I have not gone forward with that because I wanted to meet with you first to see what the interest was, to see in fact if there was going to be an investment in this program for another year. Our graphic designer, who we've been working with for years, charges us $1,000 per brochure. So their prices are not exorbitant, but I could certainly save that every semester. That would be $2,000 roughly by the end of the year. We do already have, the brochure available through a web page that's actually connected to the school page, which only costs us $50 a year. But we haven't set up at this point how to sign up for courses, how to do the billing, and all of the nitty-gritty that goes along with that. As far as our direct mailing, our constituency that we send direct pieces to is really made up of the group of people who have taken courses or requested brochures from us specifically. And it's not a huge number. Looking to see if I have that down. It ends up being, I wish I had that number in front of me, but I don't. Oh, here it is. We send out roughly 11,000 copies a year. It comes out to $4,000 per year in fees, because by the end of the bulk mailing, it's not a significant amount. Our first class, again, that's mostly through phone requests, and unfortunately, it's 44 cents per copy, and there just doesn't seem to be any way to avoid that at the time being.
Any more questions?
Yeah.
Tom?
You know, just also just a few other thoughts that have come to my mind. You know, there's a lot of other programs in Portsmouth when you think about classes for adult education that are offered through Strawberry Bank, through other programs that where I'm thinking just off the top of my head where, you know, the music hall puts things, events on like Writers on a New England Stage, where there might be an opportunity to have, as Mitch said, some kind of a book study that could be tied in with the music hall, so that from a marketing standpoint, you're trying to leverage the work that you could do with the music hall, where maybe the music hall is in some way sending a note out about Portsmouth adult education, or tying something in with a program with the Strawberry Bank, where you're now working and trying to reach out to their constituency, so that there's some cross-pollination. That we have some obviously core programs, but maybe there are other programs that people would very much be interested in that could suddenly tie in with something that the music hall is doing, or something that the Strawberry Bank is doing with the Gundalo project. But just I think there's some opportunities to explore some other areas that maybe gives us more leverage in how we do this, as well as think about websites. We have the city, Portsmouth City website. We have the Portsmouth Library, and those other organization websites that there might be some ways to find ways to be a component on some of those, whether it's banners or other things to try to generate traffic. But I think there's it could be a more substantive discussion on just coming up with some ideas on how to market this program.
Absolutely.
Yes, Rebecca.
I just have a quick question or comment. Where does the line blur between recreation and education? Like, a lot of these things are really wonderful and are educational, but a lot of them are really recreational.
Right.
And I sort of wonder if, the city's rec budget would have any room to help support it. Just a thought.
That's a good question.
Okay. So maybe I can just do a rough summary, right? So it sounds like what the board is suggesting is a combination of some of the ideas that you've submitted to us, right? So thinking creatively of ways to maybe increasing some of your fees, as you suggest, you could raise like $3,500, $3,600. Looking at ways to decrease your expenses with printing. So you're saying you don't think it would be smart to totally cut out all at once. So maybe you substantially cut, so 60,000 copies a year is a lot, so maybe you substantially cut back. And come up with a way for this coming year, to really stay within the $3,100 that we already have in the budget for next year. I don't see any way that the school board would be able to come forward with more money. I mean, so I guess I'm just suggesting that you think about ways to do this and maybe really struggle at that cutting of expenses in terms of the printing. It's hard, I think what I hear you saying is it's hard to know if you were to do it cold turkey. That might be totally disruptive to the program.
Right.
So I'm suggesting cutting back the number that you're doing, targeting maybe less in the periphery around, if you have a little bit more, demographic information about who your students are, and knew that, 80% come from Portsmouth and 20% from outside, then you would be able to make the decisions as to how many to print and where to distribute them, as opposed to, sort of a shotgun approach of let's get as much out there as we can. Because I actually think, in terms of printing, and I think some of the other members have said, it doesn't sound like a lot of money, but the pressure on the board is really intense. And that money is precious.
I understand, thank you. Steve, can I ask you, the $3,100, is that all inclusive for the entire budget for the program, or?
That's the entire general fund subsidy, same as it was this week.
Now, what about the 27 account?
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing you with the echo.
He was saying there's no money left in the 27 account.
In Fund 27, there's no fund balance left.
So the $3,100 would be the entire program, is that what I'm understanding?
Well, it would be the entire subsidy over and above what you were able to match revenue,
So the $36,000 roughly that you bring in every year, that seems, to be consistent is what you
So it
suggest.
looks like if you were to bring in the same amount, say 36 plus 31, you're probably at the $40,000 level. So that might give you a guidance where to put the expenses, which is essentially reducing by about 15 or 16,000.
So am I understanding correctly that the board has approved for us to spend money initially, assuming that we will make up a revenue of $36,000? I know I've got expenses coming out of we'll have printing expenses, limited, but printing, mailing expenses, not to mention my salary and so forth. And I just want to make sure that the $3,100 is not all that we're looking at for.
I guess what they're saying is whatever you can bring in for revenue, plus the 3,100, should match your expenses.
Right, but what you're asking is the question, if you were to go forward with printing 20,000,
Right,
that's going to clearly cost more than $3,100.
that's correct.
So, and you don't have any income at the moment.
That's
you don't have
correct.
any course classes. So you're asking whether you would be allowed to spend more than that.
That is the
idea
question.
that-
Yes, thank you.
That.
You're talking about a timing issue more than anything else. So because you're not sitting there by yourself with a checking account, the cash flow is not the concern. The concern is the operating level, operating break-even point, so that if at the end of the year, the money you bring in plus the $3,100, match your expenses, then you'll be fine.
Okay,
I mean, the fact that you haven't taken in anything because you haven't had a semester yet,
right.
that's not really the issue at this point.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear.
Next, you have.
The other thing that I'm sure you've already thought about doing, because you're trying to meet a difficult expense goal, is presumably some of these courses actually generate more revenue than others.
That's right.
And some of them actually make you a profit, if you will, and some just break even.
That's correct.
There may be some that don't, although presumably that's not true.
We try not to run the programs that don't break even. Yes.
But it may be that what you will need to do is focus on those that generate more revenue, and those that are break even you can't offer because you can't afford it.
Correct.
And so you might have to begin to make those decisions, at least temporarily, until sort of we better understand how do you drive 700 people into this program, or ideally more, and cover all the expenses through those 700 people,
Right.
or more. I mean, that's the challenge.
That's right.
And build it.
And build it. I mean,
Build it,
ideally,
right.
what we want to do collectively is build this program.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think there's a great opportunity to think about running this as a small business and to put on your entrepreneurial hat and say, you've already showed here and laid out that, we can cover the expense gap. We have ways to cut it, but the risk is do we lose participation? And
Right.
so that entrepreneurial hat is really to Dexter's point, evaluating the classes that we have. What are the ones that are going to maximize our revenue? understand where our students are coming from, what's a good transitional plan to do it. I don't think there's anyone on the board saying that, well, you know, we're not going to fund this, but I think we need to have some assurances that we're actually putting this thing on track to run and operate on its own, you know, without our support, so that, you know, if we can hear in the next couple of months that, you know, you have a plan that's going to really move this in a direction that we can now track and see some changes, I see great potential with this program, and would love to hear some more ideas, and maybe there's an opportunity to have people on the board come up with some ideas to share directly with you. I know I have some more. But I think that's the opportunity, is to really think about it, running this as a small business, to you know, put on the creative hat.
So, two quick things. One is, do you feel comfortable enough with the answer that you can move forward?
Yes, I do, thank you.
Okay. And the other is, maybe I can extend an invitation now for you to come back mid-year.
Okay,
And we can have another conversation, and you can fill us in on.
where we are at that time?
Yeah.
Okay,
That'd be
sounds
great.
Okay, thank you very much.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Has a master's degree in elementary education from the University of New Hampshire. And she is a first-year teacher, but last year spent some time in a long-term substitute position for us at Little Harbor. We have Laura LaValle for an English position at Portsmouth High School. Laura has a master's degree in English from the University of New Hampshire, and most recently was a 6th grade reading and language arts teacher at Kadena Middle School in Okinawa, Japan. We have Catherine Fitzpatrick for a 1-year English teaching position at Portsmouth High School. Katie has a master's degree in English from Tufts University, and most recently was a history and English teacher at Bedford High School in Bedford, New Hampshire. We have Olin Johansson for the choral director position at Portsmouth Middle School and High School, filling in for Wendell Farrington. Olin has a master's degree in music composition from the University of Massachusetts, Amherst, and is a first-year teacher. We have Caitlin Kern for the music teaching position at Portsmouth Middle School. Katie has a bachelor's in music education from the University of New Hampshire, and most recently was an instrumental music director at Hampton Academy in Hampton, New Hampshire. And we have David Lilly for the automotive teaching position here at Portsmouth High School in the Career Technical Center. And David presently is service manager and automotive technician for Carter's European Auto Repair in Greenland. And he is also a first-year teacher.
I move to approve.
You want to take them as a block? Thank you. Okay. Second. Okay, any discussion on these? Seeing none? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Very good. Thank you. We've come to the end of our agenda. So unless there's anything else, motion to adjourn. So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you very much.
That's right.